Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm Ann Richmond, aka Hearth Singer, the head bard in charge. I believe that we have fixed any and all technical difficulties that we may have been having before. Please let us know if the sound is good. But we're going to dive right back into the show, give a little bit of an intro, and then hit the stuff. Hey, thank you so much also, by the way, for anybody who let us know that the sound was pure trash before we got too far into it. Garbage. All right, let's do this. Guys, damn it.
Let's do this. What? Take two.
Take a billion. Hey, everybody, I'm Ann Richmond, aka Hearth Singer, the head bard in charge around these parts. And today I will be discussing, well, a new topic on our channel, on my channel. But I'm joined to discuss this topic, as I so often am on Fridays, by Chris Gravenstein. How's it going?
Is I. Hello.
Yes.
Is I. And I can't wait. This is an interesting topic.
Yeah, we are going to be talking about what do you play when you're not playing D&D when it comes to tabletop RPGs, which is a topic that I think a lot of people are interested in. Some people don't know how to dip their toes in the water, or they just don't. They're like, it's analysis paralysis, and we're here to create a Thunderdome-like competitive atmosphere where we may fight each other, and you may vote at the end for the system that you would like to play most based on our assessments.
Because unpopular opinion, D&D is not the best system out there.
Yeah,
it's not.
Or
for you, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of systems out there, and they all serve different purposes. But at the end of the day, maybe D&D isn't what you're looking for, and there are lots of other options for you.
It's true.
Let's get into it. Before we do, I want to say, hail sponsor. Is that the new thing I'm doing? Is that a thing? I think it's a thing now. Hail sponsors. Eldritch Foundry is the sponsor of today's show. They are awesome makers of customized miniatures, and they have an awesome character creator on their site. You can create sci-fi heroes, fantasy heroes. They added a ton of May 4th themed content. Nudge, nudge, you know what I mean, without any, I guess, what am I trying to say? IP breaking rules. You're like, I don't know how to help you.
I don't know what you mean. Please go into detail.
I can't, or I'd have to kill you with my beam sword.
Yeah, with your beam sword and your unobtainium helmet. Wait, no, that's also copyright infringing. Oh, well.
But yeah, so that is something that you can explore. It will come. The link will come through the chat periodically for Eldritch Foundry. Make sure to check them out. And then at the end of today's show, I will be giving away a code for you to get your own customized miniature. One of the best things about it, though, is that if you are a 3D printer aficionado, if that's part of your hobby jam, you can print your own custom 3D miniatures by purchasing an STL, and I believe it's only $3.99, so less than $4.
That's way cool. Like, why didn't someone do that before? Like, I don't understand. Like, it's such a good idea.
There definitely are people who do it, just not for the low price of $3.99.
Yeah, I guess
there are competitors out there, but they're not Eldritch Foundry. And what I like about Eldritch Foundry, honestly, is that they have a less cartoony style than some of their competitors. So it's all about what you want. But yeah, they have lots of options and more coming out every month. So make sure you check them out.
Yeah, I was super impressed. Pleasantly surprised when I checked it out the other day.
Me too, honestly, because when I'll be honest, even though I'm an affiliate now, I was super excited when they launched their Kickstarter. And then when it was finally open to everybody, I was like, oh, there's just not a lot of options. And I feel like I had all these high hopes for like what would be available to me. And now, I mean, they've really made up a lot of lost ground that I felt they had. And it's hard. A good opinion once lost is very hard to obtain again, as Jane Austen would say. I don't know if that's an exact quote, but it's fine.
It sounds right.
It sounds right. It sounds fantastic. So absolutely check them out. They are doing some really awesome things, and I cannot wait to tell you guys about some of the things that we're going to be doing together in the future. But for now, you're going to have to stick around and listen to us battle it out about different tabletop RPG systems that are not Dungeons and Dragons. And at the end, if you do stick it out, you may have the opportunity to win your own customized miniature from Eldritch Foundry. So, beginning our battle, our rap battle. No, it's not. Sadly, this is not a musical episode. But
I'm not prepared for that rap battle.
You're like 5, 6, 7, 8.
That's a different kind of battle.
Exactly.
You're mixing your musical battle metaphors.
I know. Listen, there's who's to say if you ask Lin-Manuel Miranda, I think he would tell you that anything can be a musical, especially rap.
I resonate with the comment in chat. It's all Dungeons and Dragons. Always has been.
Oh my gosh. Putting in vote for Fate. Fate is actually not on our list. We picked our own 3, right?
Well,
Each of us picked our own 3.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I've never played Fate. I've dabbled in but there's only so much time in the day. So like, there's plenty of systems that I've always wanted to play, but I've just simply not been a hobbyist or had enough time to play as many as I would have liked.
Yeah. Well, Chris is going to get us started. What is the game that you are beginning with, Chris?
So I'm going to begin speaking of Legend of the Five Rings.
Oh.
Yes. A system that I will admit I do not have a terrible amount of history with. I haven't been able to play very much, but I've done a lot of time tooling over the rules, and I've played enough times for a good proof of concept. And so I think I have... at least some pedigree to speak on it. Should I just go
launch
into it then?
Tell me, you know what? Here's how I think we should do it. I'll ask you questions, but I'm gonna let you present first, and then I'll follow up with some questions that I might have, and then you can do the same for me.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So my main thing about L5R that I found so awesome, and I won't speak of the setting because I personally feel like there's something to be said about like the sort of morally and the morally like appropriationally poised feudal Japanese setting. But that aside, I think that the system has a lot going for it. And part of my favorite thing about it is that the game gamifies a lot of elements that are normally sort of just like left open to the players. Like, for example, I always say that Dungeons and Dragons is really a combat simulator with optional RPG rules, right? Optional RP rules. There's nothing in the books that actually says that you need to actually RP. There's only rules really that support like tasks that require effort and combat. And that's basically it. Everything else in the middle is just kind of playing for playing. But L5R has a tendency to gamify a lot of things that normally players might ignore because it doesn't really matter statistically. There's no circumstances for your actions because there's no stats on your character sheet to sort of support those types of decisions. And I'll say that I'll break this down into 3 major things. The first one is the fact that it makes social encounters a combat encounter. Like it basically makes social combat a thing. Basically by pushing like instead of there being HP for your enemy, there's like a momentum track, and depending on whether or not you successfully roll social checks and use abilities that benefit you in social settings, because there's lots of classes that are designed specifically to be good talkers and not just like to fight, and so all of their abilities support like social skills, and you have to like have to push the momentum in your direction until such that you convince the other party of whatever you're doing. And I love the fact that you feel like there can be like stakes, and you feel like you can really kind of figure out when the beginning, the middle, of the end of like a social encounter happens, as opposed to just like, oh well, how many more enemies are there in the field? How many are dead? How close to 0 HP is this guy? It's a different kind of thing. And also by statifying social stats, it's not all about like, oh well, how do I maximize my AC and how hard I can swing my sword and things like that.
Yeah.
I also love the fact that the system sort of gamifies sort of like the status of your like the sort of just the way your character exists in the world. Like when it comes to combat, I really love the fact that they have a rule where your like HP in this game is more or less representing your stamina and how well you are able to defend yourself. And when you take damage in the way of HP damage, you're actually just taking damage in like your ability to defend yourself. And then if you run out of like this stamina, then you actually start taking real damage to your body. And for me, it's very much like it creates a good mental image for like that moment in like an anime or something where like enemies are crossing swords, you know, and then like they're just sort of like wailing on each other and like beating the guy into the ground, and he's desperately holding his sword up, and then that final blow where he knocks his blade away, and then his next attack lands the mortal blow.
Yeah.
And it just, there's so many things about the stats that just sort of, by virtue of how the game is designed, inform your decisions. Like the fact that instead of like, you know, your core 6 physical and mental attributes, you just have the 5 rings, which govern your approach to how to like what bonuses you get to your rolls. And you can, like, yes, let's say fire is my highest score. I can roll fire every time all I want, but fire is not necessarily always the best approach. And if I'm going to insist on using fire every time, if I can't make an informed role play decision about why that applies to the particular role, then it doesn't make any sense thematically, and the whole system falls apart.
Right.
And so it's like, yes, I think that Earth might be the best approach for this, and that's my lowest stat, but I can be informed to make better choices because of that.
Well, the other thing that I think is cool about Legend of the Five Rings is the idea that it is a low magic system.
Yeah,
so
I also really like low magic systems.
There's like a spirituality aspect of it that feels more like, for lack of a better descriptor, monk-like in D&D, if you were to compare it to that. Like your ki, your energy, your like there's certain classes that feed more into that. I said you didn't want to talk too much about the setting and like the appropriation aspects of it, but I do think it's important to touch on it like a little bit, although we're certainly not the people to like.
I will say it this way. The other thing I was going to touch on was like the oh gosh, what is it called? Honor and renown systems. Okay, so basically the way those two things works is they're just sort of like background scores, you know, from like, they're not like a stat that you're rolling on. They're just kind of like a score, a static score, and one represents how your renown in the world, right? Like how well you are known due to your feats of strength or renown. And then there's your honor, which is how well you maintain your own personal code of ethics, or in this particular way, like your samurai way, your samurai code, and how much you keep true to yourself, much like a paladin oath. And I love that system so much because one of the biggest problems in Dungeons and Dragons is like the whole like murder hobo situation, right? Because unless the DM sort of plans it in there's not a lot of circumstances in a statistical sense that have there be any circumstances to your actions. Like your interplay with like NPCs and things like that can be bad, but like if you go to a town that you never plan on going to ever again and murder everyone in it, technically there's no downside. From the
mechanically.
Well, that's the thing. That's my argument. It's mechanically, there's nothing stopping you from murdering every NPC you come across, except for maybe the DM deciding that someone gets revenge or you get arrested.
I will say that what you're saying though is that this provides a mechanic that can help. Another way to look at it is that it helps guide the DM to make choices.
Yeah, I was going to say, I like using it as like a gating mechanic for players' access to the world. You're like, well, why would I care about my renown? Well, if your renown is of a particular level and you go to a town you've never been to, if your renown is above like a certain tier, then you could like for chance get an audience with the local magistrate because he's hurt your reputation precedes you. Whereas if your renown is in the garbage because you're a murderer, then you go there and it would literally gate you off because I could be like, well, your renown is so low that the guy running the magistrate's office literally won't even let you inside, and so like that just sort of gates you off there. So you sort of all I'm going to say is this, is that I've learned that if you want players to care about a certain aspect of your game, statify it. And if there's if there's a number to increase or a stat to manage, players will innately care.
They'll at least think about it.
Exactly. They'll think about it more and it will inform their actions a little more so they can manipulate those scores in a way that benefits them. And I just love that because there's just a lot of thought there, in my opinion.
Now, I think one thing to keep in mind is with these like Asian-inspired worlds, right? I would say that if you're not going to, like, if you're going to let that stop you from experiencing Legend of the Five Rings at all, then you should also look at yourself and think about, like, why do you like Avatar? because
Yeah, well-
Avatar was also written by two white guys and was obviously heavily inspired by those things. But it's a lot more complicated than that as far as like things that have been written online. So I encourage people to go out there and read those reasonings. If that's something you're curious about, but we probably won't dive too deep.
And let's be clear. Like, I love the setting. I think it's really great. I just thought that it's important to note that because I think
it's Asian. It's an Asian inspired world that was not written by Asian people.
Yeah, exactly. But like, I think that Legend of the Five Rings honestly is really ripe for you to skin into any universe that you want to homebrew yourself. Like I always talk about, I want to take L5R and run an Avatar The Last Airbender campaign because it lends itself to that very well. Yeah. Granted, a low magic version of that, you're not very good at bending, but still.
Well, the big things that you mentioned that are really cool is if you want people to care. Let's codify the summary so people have something to cling on to. You roll dice that have symbols, so there's not a lot of math.
My God, I completely forgot about that.
That's fine. It's fine because I'm going to go into that in another Fantasy Flight game that we're going to talk about later. But you roll dice that have symbols, so if you don't want to sit there doing math, it's great for that. It is a system that encourages you to think about things like honor and fame as a part of your party and almost as a party stat rather than just an individual character stat. You know what I mean? And then lastly, what's another, like, the third thing you think should stand out about it for people looking to possibly do it? I guess the cinematic quality and the breakdown of like when a social scene is over or a combat scene is over, which I think is also one thing I was going to say when you were talking about that. That's super helpful because I find sometimes people let scenes go on too long. You know what I mean? Because they're like, how do we properly cap this? You know, how do we cap it off?
I mean, the game is literally set up for it to be like the end of a scene.
Yes.
Right?
So that's really helpful. So 10 out of 10. I think I'm going to respond to your first proposal with something a little different. I want to talk to those of you who are, I want to talk to all of you, let's be real. But there are probably some of you who want to try another system, who are scared of something too different from D&D, or maybe Pathfinder, but you want a little bit of change. And for everything else, there's MasterCard. There's Starfinder. I want to talk about Starfinder. So I've played a lot of Starfinder. It is by Paizo. For those of you who have heard of Pathfinder, which was originally a follow-up to D&D and then has developed their own system since, and even has a second edition of Pathfinder. Their Pathfinder game is all high fantasy with lots of adventure paths and resources. Their Starfinder game happens in the distant future of the Pathfinder universe. There's a period called the Gap where nobody can remember what happened, and then people woke up realizing that they were married to people or forgetting why they were on a planet or who they were, like their entire past, depending on the age of the person. And then it's all future world, future science, it's technology and magic, and it feels like Guardians of the Galaxy. You're on a crew and you're out exploring the Pact Worlds, or in the case of my podcast, Starfound, we are beyond the Pact Worlds, and they released a tool that helps you build your own planets with their own problems and their own residents and indigenous cultures. Like, this game encourages far-flung exploration, and it is bound together by crunchy rules. So if what you want is crunch, you'll have that classic...
Oops, all crunch.
Yeah, you'll have that classic Pathfinder crunch with tons of customizability. Like, it can be a lot to handle, but like lots of, I think it's feats every other level, as opposed to, like, in comparison, for those of you who've never tried it, like, you get feats every 4 or 5 levels in D&D. Like, here you're getting feats every other level. Sometimes you get like a bunch of equipment you can choose at level 1. You get all sorts of class-driven things and sometimes ancestry-driven things. It really makes you it gives you the opportunity to build something super, super customized. And so you can take inspiration from Star Trek, you can take inspiration from Star Wars, you can take inspiration from just any intergalactic tale that you want. But you could also have like an elf if you want. You could be a drow, you could be an elf, you could be a dwarf, or you could be, you know, a butterfly person that spawns and has like multiple genders. You could be an android. You can be like any number of bug people or gelatinous people. Like, it's
Do you
so
like
crazy.
being rats and bugs?
Yeah.
Do I have the game for you?
Do I have a game for you? Like, there are
Oh.
so many different things, and I love that because there are people who love like super silly games, and you might choose to be just all the strangest things that you can find in these books, or you might have a game where like you want to have a more serious tone, but like it just lends itself to every table as far as like the style of play. It's fun to create stories on your own, but they have a bunch of not a bunch. There's like 3 APs right now for Starfinder, I believe, and tons of Starfinder Society modules. So if you just want to try it out, the lore is expansive, and I really encourage you guys to check it out because there are things like let me try and think. There's like a corpse fleet that's like all undead that have bone ships. There are ships that are like Moira from Farscape that are like living ships. There are people who ride space whales or have no, they don't ride space whales. They sing to the whales to get the whales to drag their ships through the galaxy. Like there's so much cool stuff, and when you want something that feels like Star Wars, but you don't want to have to, or like any of these other IPs that I've mentioned, but you don't want to have to be so held in that you have like fans who will be like, well, that's not how that works. Like, this is also a great system for that as a DM, because it'll give you access to like the moral quandaries that maybe a force sensitive person might have through a class like a Solarian. But it'll also give you the opportunity to create your own lore and kind of fudge the edges a little bit without having to have people like hold you to, well, in this book this happens, don't you know that the Night Sisters do X? Like, that's one of the really nice things about it, I feel. Chris, what are your questions about Starfinder?
Oh yeah. How do you find that like that you mitigate the crunch enough to like give the other elements of the game room to breathe?
Well,
you know what I mean?
Let me tell
like,
you
how do
that
you,
sometimes...
Yeah, how do you think the crunch assists things other than like combat and machines and stuff?
So I think the crunch helps organize stuff like Starship Combat. So if that's something you want, there's a way to like something to rest it on. That being said, there's a lot of tracking that you have to do of like what bonuses and reductions you have for various roles. I will say that much as I've found with other systems, being able to figure out like how your brain receives that information helps you find the tools to mitigate that crunch. So I recently started using Hero Lab for my Starfinder stuff. And yes, it has meant that I've had to pay a subscription fee and do all this stuff, but it means that all of my I's are dotted, my T's are crossed, and I'm not doing that thing that I used to do where I go, well, I have 2 attacks because, wait, no, in this situation, I don't have that. Okay, well, no, I've used this action. Wait, no, I haven't. Because
turns out I haven't been adding 4 for the past 3 levels.
It's
like
exactly. So it kind of organizes your character sheet for you. It allows you to print out your character sheet either with just the names of your spells or with all of your spells and the like relevant text printed out there, so you're not flipping through the book. So it is akin to a Roll20 or a D&D Beyond. But Hero Lab does that for several different systems. And as I'm seeing in chat, Prop Avery says there are 8 multiple book APs now for Starfinder. So
what's an AP?
An adventure path.
Oh, adventure path.
Yeah, it's like it's a campaign, right?
Yeah,
it's a pre-written campaign. So so that's that's how I have found that for me, it helps mitigate those things. As a DM, what it allows you to do is give a name to the environmental challenges. So if there's radiation, there's a stat for that. Much like you were talking about social encounters needing sometimes rules to contain them or allow people to focus on them. Here, we're dealing with hostile environments when you land on a planet, not just because of the people, but because there may not be breathable air. Or I did.
Is there air?
Is there
you
air?
Don't know.
You don't know. Find it. Fuck around and find out. You're dealing with different like spacesuits that allow you to deal with different atmospheres like that. You're dealing with I know there was an episode of Starfound where we had a space station that was like careening, like was falling out of orbit and was falling down into the atmosphere of a particular planet. And our entire like skill encounter, which felt like combat even though there wasn't combat, was us trying to figure out how to get close enough to a core that like was surrounded by radiation to help like put the thrusters online and get this thing back into orbit. And then it was like me using all of my crazy gravity powers as a Solarian to like stick myself to the hull in my spacesuit so I could run around and use all of my paladin fightery strength to like make these connections and be athletic and cool. And it gave everybody kind of a chance to do that stuff, but it was all because the different environments had different like statistical effects.
I was going to ask, but you may have already answered this. So, you know, you say you like Starfinder so much because of like the heavy customization allowed by this like verbose crunchiness.
Yeah.
But what would you say is like your favorite thing that is like that like for the most part you could only really find in Starfinder? Or what's something that like you ran into in Starfinder that you were like, oh, that's why I'm playing this system. That's what I love about this system that I don't see everywhere else.
I love that at times there's more lore than you could possibly consume, and then at other times, like I think Paizo is really masterful at creating like plot hooks, and everything is just littered with plot hooks. The character I play on Starfound is a Vlaka, which is an anthropomorphic like wolf person, and there were maybe a couple of paragraphs about the Vlaka, but I've invented like this whole entire culture around them, and that's what I've invested into it. And I like the fact that my, you know, kind of Jedi inspired wolf culture, if that makes sense, they're like I can't really describe what it is about the fact that like magic and technology live in such symbiosis in this world, and that's what I love the most, because I like sci-fi, but like I want magic, I want mystery, I want faith, I want gods and demons, and things like that. And I love that even things like going into Lightspeed or the Drift in Starfinder. The Drift is just like one hair beyond opening up into the like the hell plane in this world. So if you like fall out of the drift and don't do your coordinates correctly, things can like slip through your course and you can pull like a demon out in front of the ship, or you could fall through and end up in hell, which has happened to me, and you know, I don't recommend it.
You hate to see it happen.
Came out of there with a demon hand and a lot of gripes. Wouldn't want to stay there again. But they're skittermanders who are like your fluffy 6-armed stitches. You know, there are there's something for everybody in this world. So yeah that's kind of why I like it the most.
Nice.
Yeah. Or not the most, but I like it a lot. Enough to play it regularly.
Yeah. Enough to want more.
Yeah, it's the system that I play, aside from a different one, which I'll talk about later, the most out of the non-D&D canon. So Chris, what are you following this up with?
I was going to kind of move a little farther away from the super crunchiness. I was going to comment on. I'm sorry, my Zoom just minimized. I was going to move away from that into. I was going to talk about World of Darkness. So I like World of Darkness because I mean I sense in a theme that I think I like low magic settings more than I'm giving credit for. And I think I like part of what I like about all that is that I like a world that presents combat as a last resort, right? And World of Darkness is also very very good at like creating a world where you feel like you could pretty much die at any time, because the stats are sort of purposely built in a way that if you get enough successes, that's just kind of it. Particularly if you're immortal, but normally that's not what's happening. But that sort of feeds into what I also like about World of Darkness is the fact that it's so modular. And I really love the concept that you have like, there is the World of Darkness, and you create a character in World of Darkness, and then you can take any what supernatural creature that you want and sort of slot that in. And while they all have their own books and on all their own rules, they exist in the same
together.
Yeah, like you can create a party where you have, you know, a mage and a changeling and a werewolf and a vampire, and they're all hanging out trying to save the universe together. And I think talk about customization. The fact that you can literally like cross-pollinate between what feel like completely separate worlds, considering that all of those creatures are all fighting different secret wars of their own and trying to just survive. And it doesn't, you know, and it takes place in our world, but it also doesn't really have to. The rules are sort of like I find that the rules are more just kind of the rules always read like a storybook, where I'm just like, here's all the lore and the kinds of things you can run into, and here's a lot of cool ideas. Now just run with that. Like, just take all this theming and just go and do whatever the hell you want in this world and live your best fantasy life.
So my what intimidates me about World of Darkness, and I'm wondering what your thoughts are, is that similar to your frustration with like crunch and wondering like what makes this, no reward is worth this, what would make this worth it, is that there's so many people who have played in the World of Darkness regardless of like which edition of things are, right, that they've played Vampire the Masquerade forever. Like, how do I even find an entry point? Like, how do you navigate that?
Like how does someone get in, how does someone get to be new at a hobby that's been around for so long?
Yeah, I mean, that's a question we're always trying to answer.
Right. Well, I mean,
which of the systems would you recommend for that, I guess?
I mean, the ones that I don't have a lot of experience with ones outside of Vampire and Werewolf, simply because I didn't roll deep on those systems when I was first entering the hobby. But those are the ones that I have the most experience with. And you know what? Hey, literally the narrative of those worlds supports the fact that you can be new to this, right? You're like, I just got turned the other day by this dude, and so now it's going to be your job. You brought me into this world. You're gonna be my Sherpa to figure it out. Like the narrative is like intrinsically linked to the fact that people are brand new to this world that they didn't know about. And
then as far as like the dice, like is it one of those things where I guess it's D8s, right?
Well, yeah, but that's another thing about...
Or is it D10s?
It's D10s.
D10s. They're D10s.
Sorry. They're D10s. But why did you ask me if you knew? No.
I don't know. I had to think about it.
No, same here. They're D10s. But I mean, similarly to something like Legend of the Five Rings, while yes, they do still use numbers, the fact that like it's just like, oh, I have this many bubbles filled out for that stat, so I roll this many dice, and it's always a D10. And if I get this amount, if I get a 6 or higher, I succeed. And if I get a 5 or lower, it's a 50-50 chance. You know what I mean? Like it's low. It's easy on the math because it's not about adding up those numbers. It's just about like hitting a threshold, and then just always the same dice, and just how many bubbles, how many dice, the end. You know.
So and okay, so that makes sense, and it makes it like very approachable from that perspective.
For sure.
So with Vampire, you have obviously like your thirst, right? Your hunger.
Yeah.
I don't know what it would be in Werewolf, but does every system have like a, you know, like if you engage too much in this, you become, you know, the primal version of whatever this is?
Yes, in a sense. Like, and I mean, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, but I mean, I believe like Vampire has like thirst, and werewolves have like rage, I believe, and then like mages have like I think it's called Umbra, which is more like you becoming untethered to the arcane nature of your power. You know what I mean? So everyone has like a supernatural resource threshold. Yeah, like threshold that if they don't keep that in check, something bad happens. whether or not you consider an enraged werewolf to be a bad thing. Your mileage might vary, but yeah, and that's another thing. I like that. There's always sort of like a ticking clock. It don't play the game if you don't like gritty, because they're just the way that the stats are and the way that things can swing so wildly.
Yeah.
From that is very much like save or die the game system.
It's also very much like it's very psychological. Like your thirst or your hunger can be related to your backstory and like what makes what like how your hunger is manifested. A lot of times, like what are they storytellers? What do you call them?
I believe they're storytellers.
Can pull on those threads psychologically in the storytelling. So if you don't want somebody like in your mind playing around, it is way more intense in World of Darkness games. It's literally called the World of Darkness. So like consider that.
Yeah, consider the coconut.
Engaging.
But
yeah, consider the coconut. The what?
Consider the leaves. Sorry.
Amazing.
So, but back to World of Darkness.
Leaving our weird friendship behind for just a second.
But no, I do like that though, because I kind of like that by existing in the World of Darkness and signing up for this, like, lycanthropy or vampirism, that you are constantly like towing the line and teetering on the edge of chaos, and you are and both the narrative supports that too, that you're desperately trying to toe that line, and that in and of itself can also make informed decisions about how you conduct your character, because if you push against the limits of this world too hard, it snaps it's narratively, and it makes sense. It just works if that's the kind of story you want to tell.
Says that Mage the Threshold is Paradox.
That's,
And now I remember that because we played Mage the Ascension for a hot. We played Mage the Awakening for a hot second. Yeah. Like 3 weeks, but it was enough for me to be like, oh, I like this. I be a part of this.
I would love to play that again. Yeah.
I have Chris and Emily bought me, our co-host on this show who is not here this week, bought me Vampire the Masquerade for Christmas, and I have looked through it, and I have fingered its many pages.
You've probed its depths.
I've probed its depths, and I have so many thoughts, and would love to play at some point. So I guess I'll have to figure that out. But anyway, so I guess I know what I'm voting for. Okay, so that's World of Darkness, I feel. How do I come back from that? Let's talk about... do you want to do Nordic horror, or do you want to do Star Wars next?
I don't know.
What are your thoughts?
Well, whichever you want to talk about more, because we don't have a ton of time left.
Okay, here, I'm going to do Star Wars quick, because you all know what Star Wars is, right? Okay, so let's pull it up here. And, all right. So... Star Wars the role-playing game, another fantasy flight system. It features a lot of the same mechanics as Legend of the Five Rings, because it's created by the same company. So you've got your different dice with different symbols on them. Some symbols are good and you want to see them. Then they're the counterparts, much like a dyad in the Force, where they are bad symbols and they cancel each other out, and you want to have more good symbols than bad symbols at the end of a roll.
Don't we all?
And that's pretty much it. But it feels like you're casting runes. There's not a lot of math. Even if that messes with your head, there are automatic rollers online that you can use, that you can pay. I think there's like a Star Wars dice app that you just pay a certain amount of money, and then you have dice for all of the licensed Star Wars games that there are, which is super cool. And it'll just tell you, you have 2 successes and 1 advantage. It also allows you to succeed at a cost or fail with a minor advantage. Like all of that stuff is very cool. It has, for every single book, right, there are books that will be more scum and villainy related, and you'll have all sorts of far-flung adventures with bounty hunters and smugglers, and if you like low magic, you don't need to have any Force-sensitive people at all. It can all just be a great mystery or some hokey religion that you never even deal with. You also have, on the other hand, a book called Force and Destiny. So if you want to set your adventure in during the Clone Wars and have a group of Padawans that's on an adventure for whatever reason, you can also do that. And much like World of Darkness, you can mix and match all of the things from all the books to create your own unique party with references to all. And each of these books also has a social standing or alignment kind of mechanic. So when you use the Force, there's a chance that you could accidentally tap into the dark side and use anger to power things rather than, light and balance and things like that. And that will drag you down a corruption track, basically, and will have an effect on how you are able to access your functional abilities in the game. So it doesn't gate social. It might gate social content if the DM chooses, but it also literally gates your abilities if you play rules as written. And similarly, on the other side, for your scum and villainy counterparts or diplomats, you have a kind of I can't remember what the scale is, but it's who will talk to you based on your how renowned you are, how whether there's a bounty on your head or things like that. So all of that stuff is super great. So if you liked the kind of mechanical nature that we were talking about with Legend of the Five Rings, but you want it with Star Wars, it's there, it's out there. They've stopped publishing books, which means for a lot of people that is actually like a happy place for them to go, because they're not worried about how many elements are there always going to be, so I have to always be like increasing my library. I don't think they're publishing books anymore, so the library is the library. Go forth and be Star Wars.
I will,
and that's Star Wars the role.
Yeah, I want to ask real quick, how does the system properly parse balance between characters that essentially have access to magic versus characters that don't?
So it's all about where you put your skills.
Does the game allows you to be like a Jedi? Jedi's just like a class like any other class?
Yeah, but it's very low magic. It's like when you start out, you're basically force sensitive, and much like much as these tales seem to go, there's like one cool thing that you might be able to do with your mind. As you level up, you get cooler things the same way you do as a diplomat or as a mechanic or any other class you might choose. And you can also choose abilities from other classes. So if you decide that you want to take a dip into some force sensitive aspects, you can do that later on if you didn't start out that way. But it really levels the playing field. Like, you shouldn't worry about it. The one thing I would say is the book doesn't require you to make Force users, special and limited, but I would say to really make it feel like the Star Wars universe, especially depending on what era you're playing in. And I have a whole video about how to like run a Star Wars game at your table, just in a lot of senses, on my YouTube channel. So I'll throw that in chat if people are interested in my thoughts, because I have a lot. But it's to limit, like, allow there to be one Force user class.
I'll ask this to sort of, since this is like a unique case, how would you sell the Star Wars RPG on somebody, considering it is effectively a dead system?
Yeah, I think the Star Wars RPG allows you to gives you the context and comfort to live in a world that many people have dreamed of exploring. It is not, it might offer you some new perspectives, but the lore is it always was. Yeah. It is limited only by what you're interested in exploring. And so whether or not they're releasing new books, they've given you the framework you need to explore a vastly expansive universe that already exists. So that is always expanding. Yeah. Whether or not you get a new book, like, we get more Star Wars every year at this point.
Yeah.
And this has given you the rules you need to get into it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I'd be excited to test it out. Yeah.
I would love to run it again. So let's talk. So let's
step
do
into my
the
office.
Next thing. Step into my Star Wars office. What's next for you, Chris?
I was going to simply speak on sort of the
or the rules, like,
no specific system, because like I don't think I've ever played one particularly heavily enough, but like games like excuse me, like Cthulhu Dark or what 12 candles, 16 candles, 12 candles, 10 candles.
10 candles.
I've never run it. I've only played it with you.
Yeah.
So 16 candles. But no. Those kinds of systems that, and then what is it, like the free tabletop RPG system, that one that I played with Geeks for Good that one time. What was that one called?
I don't know, man.
Oh, I can't recall. But either way, just
I'll try.
System...
Is it Powered by the Apocalypse?
No. But I digress. But
okay,
systems that are basically only asking you to pick like a name, a theme, an occupation, and a tool, you know, and then just give you like D6s or some other, you know, approximation of a random, or just a random generator, and then basically just ask you to tell a story with your friends, and when you need to do something that requires effort, you roll a d6 and you yes and, right? And that, you know, that leans more heavily into like the, you know, tabletop RPGs is improv theater. But
well, and it also gives you stuff like Dread, which doesn't use any dice at all. You're literally using a Jenga
and
tower.
They often lend themselves very heavily to like one shots, because it's especially because like they don't have any kind of like they generally don't have progression systems and things like that. So but like there was a long time where like every Halloween we had a tradition where we would run like a horror themed one shot using one of these rules light systems, and it was just about like Cthulhu Dark, I believe it's called. I don't know if anyone's ever played that, but basically, you know, you roll a d6 to do anything that requires any effort, and if you roll, I can't remember what success is, but basically it's like yes and, like yes but, you know, no and, you know, no but. And
I think it had to do a lot with like how many ones you got and how many sixes you got.
And then basically it's like you got 1 dice for trying, and you got 2 dice if it tapped into who you are as a person or your tool, and then every time you saw something that was like a Lovecraftian horror from the other side of the veil, you rolled a d6. And you would just like slowly lose sanity that way. And it was just like that. It's so simple as you start with 6 sanity, and if you roll under your sanity, you lose some until you hit 1, and then you go irreparably insane. That alone was enough was enough of a mechanic to not only inform decisions, but tell me as the storyteller exactly how to like drive the narrative forward as the party slowly unravels.
Well, which is very close to the 10 candles theory of like you have as many dice as there are candles, and every time like a candle goes out, either because you have to blow it out because someone failed a roll, or because it literally your
resources are slowly whittled away, right?
Exactly.
In Cthulhu, it's sanity, and in 10 candles, it's the candles, and you get less and less dice, and then the storyteller gets dice. So it's just this wonderful ebb and flow as the scales tilt against the party.
And it made me think about stuff like like some people want to be totally in character, and I absolutely do, but it made me always want to play in that Cthulhu world. When you would run it, I would want to play some sort of historian or occult focused person, because those people literally have a timeline of my drive for knowledge is going to drive me insane. It's not, will I go insane by the end of this? You are always going to be first because you're the person who believes in the otherness that's going on. And so I loved that ticking timeline of how much can I learn to serve the party before you go insane. And then I got to play insane a bunch, which was super fun.
And it's like, imagine I think just now I just thought it's like you are not a character with stats. Your character is your stats, because like the only resource you have to help you with anything is just simply who your character is as a person and the ticking clock of their existence.
It makes you, it also like really puts you in the moment, because you're not searching on your paper to see like how I can do things. Also the like living in a horror atmosphere where there is a ticking time bomb going off, like that's really fun, and like you said, it lends itself to one shots really well. And when you're playing 10 candles in particular, not to help you make your case, but I guess I will, even though this is technically a competition, but I can't help myself because I love 10 candles.
It's a drama.
I like the fact that, you know, when you sit down to play that, everyone has to accept that, like, there's no winning situation. Winning is the story we tell along the way.
Yeah. No, it turns out that the story was the friends we made along the way.
Everyone, when you start doing these games, like, a lot of times it's, if you survive, great, or no one will survive, and we all know that, but let's tell the best horror story we can.
For sure.
Which is a totally different perspective than when you sit down to play D&D and you're like, I will clutch this PC to my chest and I will protect for as long as I can manage against this onslaught of horrors from the DN over a period of years.
I have never been more invested in a character that I've made than the one I made in 5 minutes before playing one of these kind of rules lights campaigns, because it's all you have to work with. And so you get creative, and you almost feel like it almost feels like a self-insert for me, because since there's no like intelligent stat, you know, people always make the argument in D&D. They're like, well, my character is charismatic, even though I'm not, because my dice rolls will mitigate my real life lack of like fast talking or persuasion. Whereas in those games, I almost feel like a self-insert, because it's my own cunning. You know, it's like you're solving a puzzle, right? They're all like just brain teasers, and it's a puzzle game, really, where you're just trying to figure out how to manipulate the variables that your storyteller gives you to solve the puzzle that is this game before the clock runs out. Right?
It's totally true.
And that's why I love it.
Well, let's take that on down to my last submission for your acceptance, which is a game that is a D6 system. All you're ever rolling are D6s. It's pass-fail, like a lot of the games that we're talking about. But it has a little more meat to its bones, and it can last a period of time. Shameless plug, it's Vaesen by Free League Publishing. Vaesen is a Nordic horror RPG. If you have ever wanted to mix Viking lore with fairy tales gone horribly wrong, with like a crew of investigators, like in a show like Buffy or A Secret Society or The Craft, like this is the perfect low magic system where no one is the chosen one, and we're all just trying to figure out how the old creatures of the world can exist as the turn of the century hits and technology starts to come to the forefront and push these creatures out. It is so awesome. I have played an entire campaign within the Vaesen system. The episodes are still coming out on the Lost Mountain Saga. I'll throw that in chat.
I honestly know nothing about the system, so that's interesting.
But it is very much... you have, as you said, your key stats. You have each one of them, you're filling in circles, right? You get that many dice. Each of those key stats, or each of your skills relates to one of those key statistics. And it's your basic, like, intelligence, strength, constitution style thing, right? And you have a bunch of potential skills that you can have, but they're not so many skills that you can't be like, well, I feel like, you know, mysticism spreads to my knowledge of old religions, but also what Christianity is doing at this point in history. You know what I mean? Like, so it's a web wide enough to weave a fairy in, as Shakespeare would say, and you can kind of negotiate with your GM, like what like make a case for why you think things apply, or at least that's how I tend to do it. But then, like you were saying, you like low magic stuff. Well, I play an occultist in this game, but that's akin to somebody who has always been interested in the lore of these old places of the earth. But I don't really have, until the very end of this game, I didn't have any magic. I had things like prestidigitation, which is like in this game close-up magic. Like I could use it to distract somebody because I could like do card tricks or like a Jareth ball or things like that. Yeah. Like that's the kind of stuff that you can do. But then there are surgeon classes, or you could be a hunter, or you could be a historian of some kind. Like, and once you've chosen that initial class, after that, you can choose skills from anywhere. So when it comes to customization and keeping it simple, because that's hard, right?
Yeah.
All the super customizable systems we've talked about so far require a bit of crunch. And this just says after you've done your initial choice of class, you can buy a talent once it becomes time for you to buy talents. When you level up, you can buy them from any class, and you can really just build as you like. So the whole time we were playing in that campaign, bought things that were not, I bought things from the writer a lot of the times, because I was kind of a mixture of an occultist who's like trying to write down stories of all these different Vassins and chronicle these monsters and allow them to live beyond the fact that people don't believe in them in some places anymore.
What's the dice system in this? Did I miss that?
It's all D6s. So if I'm rolling a skill, I'll take the number of circles I've colored in, or the number of dice that I've allotted to that particular skill, plus whatever attribute it's tied to, and I will just roll that many, and 6s are successes. So it's extremely pass-fail. I could be rolling, I think when I shot my bow, I would roll like 8 or 9 dice, depending on the situation, and I could absolutely fail, just straight up fail.
Yep.
And it made certain things that I cannot discuss yet because they haven't come out, just so gripping, because you'd be like, I'm the best person to attempt this, but even if I attempt it, there's every possibility that nothing will happen.
How does the game have anything sort of built in to kind of like mitigate the how crappy it can feel to just fail at things a lot? You say it's intensely pass fail, but how do you think that the game deals with the fact that like, oh, you just don't succeed on anything for like 4 attempts and you're just sort of sitting on your hands?
You're really not supposed to. When I say not supposed to, it's built like these other systems we talked about that are like social encounters are very important, research and prep, and storytelling and cinematic quality of the storytelling, the relationships between the characters as they're developing in this crucible of terrifying experiences together. That is where the primary amount of play happens. By the time you are facing off with an ice queen or a mushroom gremlin, like you can talk your way out of those situations. Yeah, what a day, mushroom gremlin, am I right? You can talk your way out of those situations or find something that like the Vassin is weak to, and it's up to the dungeon master to keep the story moving forward despite your failure. But it's always supposed to feel like you are kind of like in your Cthulhu example, peeling the veil back on something that normal people who do not have the sight, as they call it, do not experience. And based on that, you can come out with scars. And as far as hit points, everybody has 4 mental hit points and 4 physical hit points.
Interesting.
So there's not like, you're not counting down from 40 or whatever. Like you have 4 and 4. You have armor that can mitigate some hits to your person over time, but every time you take psychic damage, you become you gain a status like confused or frightened or something like that, and you move down that line until you lose it basically and are no longer have a grip with reality, or you take so many attributes in physical until you each one of those sort of lines ends in broken. And once you are broken, you roll on a D100 table for physical and see what your if you're on the physical track, then you see like how bad your injury is.
Yeah.
And if you roll closer to 100, it might be like you need to assess and deal with this injury right now, or you just straight up die. Or if you roll closer to 1, it might be like, I broke my arm, so it's going to really hurt, and I'm going to take some negatives to any dice I roll from here on out. But if I'm seen within a day, or within X number of hours, I'll be able to heal.
Yeah, I really enjoy those sort of systems where it's like the like your HP, your effective HP, for lack of to use a more well-known term, is essentially just there as a buffer before your character starts to take actual damage that doesn't just equal being unconscious, but equals some sort of like like
The other thing that
procedural
happens
injury.
Is as the statuses in your 4 get worse, sometimes you get bonuses to your rolls.
Yeah.
And sometimes what class you take means you can take advantage of those bonuses better or less well. But the same is true for Vaesen. The closer a Vaesen is to being, or a monster is being to being on the ropes, the more likely it is that they will have more dice to roll and the ability to harm you more in their death throes. So there's a lot to say for it. But it is built to be cinematic. So, you know, when you're asking like how do you balance out failure, like failure is all part of it.
It's part of the game, yeah.
Yeah, it's all part of it. We have had people, you know, go down immediately. I played a character who in the first like pilot episodes or something, like I had a knife. And then the other person I was with happened to have a revolver. And I was frightened on the first turn, which meant I basically couldn't do anything for most of our first fight. So I spent the rest of the time figuring out how can I make this person who's like a little bit dexterous and very smart, good at fighting. And by the end, I was like our last best hope. Because I figured out that with my precision score, because I'm very precise because of all the rituals I do, I was really good at ranged weaponry like bows. And so give me a bow and suddenly I was actually valid. But if I were like shooting, using other like close-up implements, maybe not so much. So yeah, so it's about figuring out like how you want to progress. But I was still happy when my character was just better at all the research elements of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean...
So it's how are you going to contribute?
Yeah, I know, and I do appreciate any system that like... If the system is sort of designed around the fact that characters will fail, then failure doesn't feel as like inert as it does in like a system like D&D where the game is not really designed for you to constantly fail at things. So when you do, nothing happens. There's no, like I was going to say in the beginning, that one of my favorite things about L5R is that because of the way the dice are designed, right, I won't get into it now, but because of the way the dice are designed, there is a lot of gray in between success and failure that is captivating to engage with, because it empowers players and storytellers to do interesting things when you don't like 100% succeed or 110% fail. Anyway,
I feel like it's a really, this particular system is just so interesting, like playing in an environment similar to our warning about World of Darkness and the darkness therein. I will say that like sexism, racism, like all of that is kind of written into this world. So if you can decide to avoid certain elements of that. But I had a lot of fun being a woman who was a high society lady, as I so often imagine myself, who was a high society lady who could get through certain doors but only be respected by men in higher positions than her so much, made it a really great handoff to people who were in the party and were male and could take the reins at those points.
Yeah.
So it really made social encounters interesting and made me think about social encounters from a different perspective. And again, that was an experience I wanted, and so I chased it and discussed it with the DM ahead of time. And there were lots of like table safety conversations throughout, and there were certainly times where I was super frustrated as Astrid, but like Anne had chosen that experience, so it was really unique.
Interesting.
And 10 out of 10 recommend. So here's what we're gonna do. I think we've discussed everything, and it's time to pretty much wrap up. So in our last 3 minutes, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a poll of all of these different things that we are going to see which one of these things do you guys want to try. Which system do you want to play?
Choose wisely.
The options are World of Darkness, Star Wars, RPG. You know what? There are only 5 options, so I'm going to put Star Wars and Legend of the Five Rings together.
Sure.
Because it's the same system, roughly.
For sure.
The 5 Rings. Let's see, what else? Low impact systems, right? Light rules, horror, and let's see, Vaesen And what am I missing? Oh, Starfinder. Okay. You have 3 minutes to vote.
3 minutes.
The poll is in chat. So hover your mouse over chat and you will see it. We are also going to do a giveaway for a custom miniature from Eldritch Foundry. Let's see. Nightbot. So get active in chat. Say hello. Say which system you're voting for. And you will have a chance to win. But only for those active in chat. And there's just a handful of people here. So you could walk out of here with a miniature easy.
Don't you want that? For your new character that you're going to make in this new system?
Yeah.
Come on now.
Starfinder is number 1, says give me an axe.
In that there's only one vote.
So far, it looks like Star Wars Legend of the Five Rings has 2 votes.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, Starfinder's got 1 vote. Oh, man, I'm watching the live results come right in. It's kind of crazy. I'm like, it's happening. Coming from the rear. Ooh, Vassen's coming in there. Coming in hot.
Mm-hmm.
What a time to be alive.
What a time to be alive. It's like marble racing.
I know, it really is.
Mm-hmm.
I love doing these votes. Hands down, Starfinder. Well, guys, listen, if you are looking for people to play these systems with, you should check out, shameless plug, our Discord, which I'll throw in chat. Lots of people who want to try lots of different systems, hang out there. It's an awesome place to be. All right, I'm going to go ahead and... Oh, wait, no, this poll is still going on. Let's see. Let's check it out. Let's check it out.
Is the giveaway from the poll participants?
No, it can be anybody who's chatting in chat actively.
Okay.
Except for me, because obviously
Wouldn't that be
I
odd?
can have as many as I want.
Wouldn't that be rigged?
It's rigged!
Rigged!
All right.
Oh my god, it's only 7:16. Why am I dying?
I don't know, man, but I tried to watch, I tried to stay up for a very impactful episode of Critical Role last night, and I was like, this is it. I'm finally having me time. And then I woke up like an hour later and I was like, what year is it?
Yeah. That happened to me after work. I sat down on the couch and turned on a YouTube video and just literally died for about 25 minutes.
All right, let's roll it. Roll it.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
Give me an axe. Congratulations on winning the giveaway. I'll follow up with you because you're on the Discord. I'll follow up with you there and get your email address so we can get you a miniature that you can order. What a time to be alive. All right, guys. The system, I think it's come down to Fantasy Flight Games, both Star Wars and Legend of the Five Rings. So I don't think we really Thunderdomed because we helped each other too much.
No, yeah.
Want to play
We're
other
Thunderdomes,
things.
but every time we knocked each other down, we're like, here, let me give you a hand, buddy.
Yeah, let me help you. Let me help you.
We're all friends here. Listen.
But yeah, there are so many options out there, and it's no shame in playing D&D if that's what you want to play.
Yeah, for sure.
But there are tons of options out there for you.
Yeah, just know that there's other options.
Yeah, so check them out. Let us know what you're interested in. Hey, if you enjoyed the show today, come back every Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Chris and I are usually here. Sometimes Emily is here as well, and sometimes other guests. And we talk about, it's basically a TTRPG talk show. We talk about all sorts of things. So please come on back if you're interested in supporting my work here on Twitch doing tabletop RPG content, or of course on YouTube as well. Head over to my Patreon. There are awesome rewards, including a special discount that my Patreon subscribers get to all options that you can order on Eldritch Foundry. And you can sign up for D&D Dungeon Mastered by me, a professional dungeon master.
A true treat.
A true treat.
True.
10 out of 10 treats.
Yeah, indeed.
Speaking of treats, my dog needs dinner. I love you all very much. Chris, thanks for being here. And we'll see you next week on Around the Hearth.
Bye.